If there's a study that shows that young boys in particular are more likely to have an adverse reaction to the vaccine than they are to catching COVID, why would
Is there a study that shows that?
Yes, let's find it. Find that study where it says young boys more likely to have an adverse reaction to the vaccine than to COVID. We were just talking about it.
I mean, the myocarditis data,
yeah.
I know, which is what a lot of people have focused on. You know, it was about 16 times higher with the disease than with the vaccine. Well, now, I don't know what other.
We'll try to find this. But my point is, the same attitude that you have about not being worried if you catch it because you're vaccinated. A lot of people have that, not being worried if they catch it because they're young and healthy. Here it is. Boys more at risk from Pfizer jab side effect than COVID study suggested. U.S. researchers say teenagers more likely to get vaccine-related myocarditis than end up in the hospital with COVID.
So,
if you have a child and you read this, don't you think that you would be hesitant to vaccinate a child that would most likely cruise through COVID with no issues, specifically if they're healthy boys?
Well, I think, yes. So I think you do have to compare apples to apples a little bit here. So I think what this is saying, Joe, is, so if you just said, here's the question, what is your likelihood of myocarditis from vaccine versus myocarditis from the disease?
It says here, the children with boys aged 12 to 15 with no underlying medical conditions are 4 to 6 times more likely to be diagnosed with vaccine-related myocarditis than ending up in the hospital with COVID over a 4-month period.
Right. Yep.
That would make me very concerned.
A lot of the kids who got myocarditis after the vaccine did not end up in the hospital. That's part of the thing. They could be treated as an outpatient. They got steroids. They did not need to be hospitalized.
But we don't have any idea how that's going to affect them long term, correct?
That is true. That will. I think when you raise that point, that's always going to be a fair point, because
but
until
when you're
we
dealing
have
with 4 to 6 times,
the absolute risk versus the relative risk it's a real thing. But I think if the question you're saying is, look, I'm worried about myocarditis, period. How likely is my child to get myocarditis from the vaccine versus from COVID?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, not just, hey, how likely are they to end up in the hospital, period, from COVID, but just how likely are they to end up with myocarditis? I think, like if you were to ask the question, how likely are you to end up in the hospital after a vaccine versus how likely you end up in the hospital after COVID, that would be a fair comparison.
What do you think is wrong with this comparison that they're making? Let's put it up again so you can specifically read it and tell me what's wrong, because I feel like you're kind of cherry picking here.
No.
Because it says the data suggests that boys 12 to 15 with no underlying medical conditions are 4 to 6 times more likely to be diagnosed with vaccine-related myocarditis than ending up in the hospital with COVID.
Ending up in the hospital with COVID for anything, right? I mean, there are two different groups of patients here. One is specifically myocarditis.
Right, but ending up in the hospital with COVID over anything would give you more data.
Yeah.
It would give you more instances.
Right. So I mean,
but that would make more people hospitalized with COVID. Your example falls the wrong way.
So
right?
What I'm saying is that most of the people who got myocarditis did not need to go to the hospital, is what I'm saying. That they were treatable outside the hospital.
Right. So you're saying that it's okay that they got myocarditis because they didn't wind up in the hospital?
Joe, no, not at all. I'm not saying that.
But it doesn't even say that.
It doesn't say that.
But it doesn't say that they're not hospitalized with myocarditis.
It doesn't say that. Right. That's
the point. It says
86%
86% of the boys affected required some hospital care.
Yeah, I think so.
That's a lot.
Yeah, I don't know that they ended up needing to be hospitalized, though.
But it says it right there. 86% of the boys affected by vaccine-related myocarditis required some hospital care.
Yeah. No, I see what you're saying. But when you look at the data
This
overall,
doesn't concern you? This doesn't make you pause?
It does concern me, totally. I think, but the question still is, from a risk-reward proposition, what is the
risk-reward proposition there is very clear.
No, but I'm just saying that if I say, hey, look, I'm worried about myocarditis, okay? Let's say that's the thing. Let's just take that as an example.
Okay.
What is the likelihood I'm going to have myocarditis from the vaccine versus myocarditis from the disease?
It seems like the likelihood, according to that study, for young boys aged 12 to 15 is far more likely to get myocarditis from the vaccine than you are from COVID.
There's not a lot of kids who go to the hospital for COVID. You're right about that. And myocarditis is a risk. But myocarditis is more common in those who get the disease.
Well, according to that study,
I
it's
know,
not.
I know.
According to that study, it's. But you're saying it.
But
You're ignoring the science that they're presenting.
No.
They're showing that you're more likely to get myocarditis at a large number, 4 to 6 times more likely.
They're not saying myocarditis. They're saying it's
then be hospitalized with COVID.
Hospitalized with COVID. Right?
Okay, put that up again. It's saying you're 4 to 6 times more likely to get myocarditis than to be hospitalized from COVID.
I will take a closer look at this, but
but you have an impulse to defend the vaccination in light of this data.
Can I pull out something
Sure,
here?
sure.
Because I have been thinking about this a lot. You know, I mean, I got teenage kids, and we looked a lot at the myocarditis data overall. So,
But that is saying that you're 4 to 6 more likely to get myocarditis than you are to be hospitalized for COVID for any reason at all.
yeah. So here's the myocarditis data specifically, which showed that it was a 16 times higher risk of myocarditis among patients with COVID-19 as compared to the vaccine itself.
Right. But this is among all patients.
This
you
is
could have
among all
90-year-old people. They count as patients, right?
Yeah.
We're specifically talking about 12 to 15-year-old boys. What I was saying to you is your confidence in not worrying about catching COVID because you're a healthy guy and because you've been vaccinated. So you catching an infection of a highly novel virus, which is a real thing, you're less worried about that because of your circumstances. What I'm saying is
because I have immunity.
These young boys will breeze through this thing for the most part. You know that, right?
I think most young people will be totally fine.
Most young people breeze through it, including my own children, breeze through it.
Yes, but can they spread it though? Can they spread it?
You can spread it. You can spread it if you get sick, but you're not worried about it because you'll be okay.
Look, it's not a perfect vaccine. I'm not suggesting that, but if I tell you I'm 8 times less likely to get infected.
Right, but you could get infected, and thousands of people have and are still spreading it, right?
Yeah.
My point was that your attitude, which is a totally reasonable attitude of not being concerned about a breakthrough infection, is exactly the same way a lot of people feel about their children and COVID.
I'm not, I think.
Do you see my point?
I do. I appreciate the conversation around this, but I think that we have to apply the same degree of certainty and confidence across the board, right?